trying to get back to the basics of great products.
Power comes from sharing information.
I try to convince people to slow down.
Free.
Yeah.
Open.
This is the Soaked by Slush podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to the first ever episode of the Soaked by Slush podcast. This fall we're going to be launching some 15, 16 episodes with the most interesting entrepreneurs and investors in the world. We're going to be talking to them about their life stories, their company stories, hands-on advice, much more, so stay tuned for that. My name is William von der Palen, and with me in Copenhagen I have my co-host Isak Rautio. What's up, Isak?
Hello, William. It's nice to be here in Copenhagen. We're not there in the same room. I have this, we had to make a bit of a compromise with the backdrop here. I'm in my room here in Copenhagen, actually. I will get a studio in October, so this will look a bit more professional. But hey, when did podcasts ever need to be too professional? I think this is good enough. And you can hear me at least, so that's good. That's a good starting point.
This is a very Corona-like episode because our guest is obviously not present in any of the rooms mentioned before. So he's in his own room in Malmö. With us, we have the Global Chief Creative Officer of Oatly, John Schoolcraft. Welcome.
Yeah, hi guys, how you doing? You know, I was just thinking it was, you just called me one of the 15 most interesting people in the world to talk to. I mean, no pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope I don't mess that up or anything like that.
We've been chatting for about 10 minutes before this episode, and it's been good so far.
So the episode's over. We're already finished. I hope everybody enjoyed this.
Damn, we forgot to record it. But hey, I guess this is the episode then. But thanks for listening to the Soaked by Slush podcast. No, super nice to have you here, John. We had a bit of we had a nice email exchange, and you agreed to be here, and we would like to talk about Oatly. And as William sort of explained, this is a more of this podcast. I guess this is also good for the listeners to sort of set the table, like what to expect from this podcast now in the future. And this is a podcast that's directed at entrepreneurs or people interested in entrepreneurship, the world of business, and this podcast will hopefully be able to provide some sort of pragmatic insight into the how of the different areas of entrepreneurship and running businesses. So let's start out with the story of Oatly, maybe a bit of a history of what Oatly is all about, and then how your career or story converges with that.
Yeah, So Oatly's story, Oatly's built on the concept of change. So basically it was some researchers at the University of Lund back in the day. And they, the original researchers came up with the concept of lactose intolerance, that people couldn't, that were allergic to milk. And so out of that, they looked for different like a different way to make milk. I mean, if you think about it now, like going through the body of a cow and then going to a factory to get processed, it's not the most efficient. But back then we didn't have a lot of good alternatives. There could have, we all know almond milk and there was soy milk, but they weren't really sufficient for many different reasons. And so in their studies, they found that they could make a milk that was like fantastic from oats. Oats can grow anywhere. They're super sustainable. The nutritionals behind oats are somewhat similar to milk, a little bit less in protein, but higher in fiber. So they made this product, and it was great. I mean, it's like a 30-year-old company. So in 2012, Tony, who's my friend, who's the CEO, got the job as the CEO. And he called me up and said, I got this job as the CEO of an oat milk company. Can we do something with it? And I'm like, oat milk? What? No, listen, you're on your own on that one. That sounds disgusting. I'm really happy for you. You're now a CEO. Good career move and everything. But sorry, Tony. I don't know.
What do we get, like grass cake? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was just like, I don't know, this sounds like a tough one. From a marketing, advertising perspective, like how are you actually going to make that interesting? So, and I think the original thing was, the story actually was, I figured like, I really hate marketing departments because I think they ruined all my best work. So I told him, okay, if we can get rid of the marketing department, I'll do it. But beside that, our level was like, what happens if we get rid of the oats? Like we took it down that far. And when we started to work with it, we realized like, this isn't an oat milk company. This is a sustainability company. This company is a vehicle actually to create change, like to inspire people to make small changes in their lives that will impact them positively. And even more importantly, maybe the planet. So from that, even back in 2012, the whole way of, redeveloping the brand and relaunching everything was all about Oatly being a sustainability company, on this mission to actually do something to save a planet that's in dire need of being saved. And so that, if you have that as a background, you realize that we never sell things. Everything we talk about is all about just having a dialogue with people. And it's never been about selling oat milk for profit, transactional capitalism. Like, you give me something, I give you something, and you give me money, and it's a success. There's a profit. We all go home. It's like, that's not interesting. That's the problem with the world. So we looked at it in a completely different way.
How did you, because there's people who want to get into entrepreneurship and they find it difficult to incorporate their own value systems. I mean, you mentioned sustainability, and one of the pernicious things about sustainability is that people, it has as many definitions as there are people who know what sustainability is, sort of. And there's sometimes people find it difficult to grasp at anything real or anything that you can incorporate into a business model or a company. How did you go about finding that identity and actually tie it to something real that you can make a difference in the world?
I don't know. I think that when we started, both Tony and I were like, again, because we've been friends for a long time, there was a reason. We just said, like, kind of like, fuck it, we're going to put our own personal values into this company. Yeah. And instead of having corporate values, because I haven't seen any set of corporate values that I find interesting. They're all just like, right, like keywords, and it's like, they don't mean anything. So if we put human values into the company and we speak about those human values, that's going to resonate with people, because people are humans. They don't want to talk to a logo. They want to actually talk to other humans. So, we just did what we think was right, and that made it an interesting company. And then there's that whole self-critical thing. I think if you're an entrepreneur starting out, like, why are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it just to make money, or are you doing it? I think people need to start. This is the whole push that Oatly is actually about, is that, how are you going to benefit society? Like, what are you doing? Like, why should you even be in business? How is it going to, benefit? The reckless pursuit of profits is like capitalism in its finest form, and it's just messing things up.
How instrumental do you think this finding the the core values and turning yourself from an oat milk company into a sustainability company, and then doing the rebranding around those human values was to the success you have?
Yeah, it's instrumental. I mean, the thing is that, think about it, like, you're back in 2012, Tony comes into the company and you start talking about all these things that you're going to do, but your actual rebrand doesn't get out till 2014. So you have a period of about, 15 months, 16 months where nothing's really happening. It's just kind of, talk. Everyone's kind of, trusting what you're going to do. And I don't know, if you look back at that time, I think the whole way of approaching that, we were working with something as uninteresting as oat milk. Like, it's super interesting now because people have seen it's a vehicle to plant-based. But back then it was oat milk. It was like, right, the only people who drank it were like people who were allergic to something or couldn't have the real thing. It was like the uncoolest thing of all. So if we didn't find a way to talk about that in a way that was actually interesting, there's like, no one would listen to us. So I think those the whole approach to how we're talking about it was talk like oat milk, not like a scientist, even though the whole idea is a scientific one, but talk about it like it's just like you would talk to your friends about it, like a group of people helping other people find something cool to try.
Yeah, exactly, because it could have turned out to be just another, there was soy milk and there was almond milk and all these various plant-based products around already. And as you said, Oatly it's not something that you came up with in 2012. It's much older than that. And
in 2012, we had like the startup company that was like 20 years old.
Yeah.
Like we had factories and we had food scientists and everyone knew what they were doing. And it was like, wow, we got a startup, we got this factory. But it wasn't easy. I mean, a lot of like our breakthrough happened by choosing a strategy of going to the top end coffee shops, to baristas, and showing them a product. We had a breakthrough product. We had the best product. But the response we got in the beginning was like, what, plant-based? Fuck off. Like we don't need another plant-based. Like every time a barista did a pour, the plant-based milk would ruin it. So they weren't thinking sustainability. They were just thinking, I want to pour the best coffee.
Right.
So it was just like, no, we have soy, we have almond. Can you guys go someplace else and leave us alone? We're trying to work here. And so it's a long process of actually having a great product, letting them pour it and find out, wow, it's microfoamable. And then actually having thought behind it of this, it has a sustainability message. You're saving 70% carbon emissions every time you pour this coffee. And that's why it took off.
Right. That's interesting you said, because that's such a small but I think powerful point, the fact that if you introduce this new product, this new plant-based product that doesn't really have anything deeper behind it, it's just going to be met with a reaction of, what is this? Like, why do I need this thing? We already have a nice milk here I can use. So, I mean, what is the sort of resistance? How did you incorporate your voice or stand behind your voice and message in front of this resistance? And when did you sort of see the tipping point of
well, I don't know. The thing is, you have to look at like oat milk is completely different than almond milk. So almond milk has like 1 or 2 almonds in it. It takes 4 liters of water to grow an almond. I don't know, a huge percent, 80% is grown in California. They're just pumping water. It's 10% of California's water resource. There's so many things like that crop is just, it's 10% of California's water resource are pumped out to the desert where they're growing almond trees. It's like, It's like you start to think about this, wow, this is just, and so oat milk is different. First of all, it's like, it's a great, great product. It tastes really good. It works really good with coffee. All those things need to be in place. We have all these amazing food scientists that have been working kind of like, not in secrecy, but without any, great cred, or they haven't been famous for 20 years, just making this great oat milk. And so it's just like, it was like, we looked at it like, wow, this is an amazing product, but no one really knows about it. So the resistance part, I think, is just like, the resistance is resistance in anything. If you've got a terrible product and you're getting resistance, there's nothing you're going to do in a branding, in a branding point of view to make that good. But if you have a great product and it just needs to be, people need to try it. And that was kind of the departure point for us, is that people just need to try it. Then you have to find a way to actually get them interested to try it. So our whole entire marketing budget, we didn't have a marketing budget in the beginning. So the only thing we had was the packaging that our products were in. So we just said, these are like billboards. It's our out-of-home campaign. We'll just create this packaging that doesn't look like any other packaging and is designed to get people to walk over to the store, pick it up, and turn it to the side and start reading. And once they do that, they got to take it home, and then they're going to be like, they're going to do 2 things, like, this is great, or this fucking is terrible. And if they think it's terrible later, see you later, it's done. But if they think it's great, then we got, then they're going to get more interested. They're going to look at our other products. They're maybe going to try the cooking cream, or they'll go over to the ice cream, or they'll find something else. So it's quite simple if you look at it from a strategic basis, but it's just like executing on things right.
Yeah, exactly. And seems to be a recurring theme from talking to many famous entrepreneurs or interesting companies, that most of them start very small with this non-scalable effort. You know, running from coffee shop to coffee shop is not maybe the most or the most efficient way to get scale, you could think, but that's also the only way to actually get customers and get the first people to love it and talk about it. And then once you hit the ground running, then it kind of feeds off itself. But I think many entrepreneurs have that kind of
the
wrong way around.
It's so important what you're saying, because when we launched in the US, so imagine Swedish company launching in the US. It's the greatest achievement you can do in your lifetime. Like, how many have actually made it? We can count on one hand. So we're going to launch in the US, and every expert will say, you got to get into retail. You got to get into supermarkets. Obviously, but if you're in the dusty aisle, the aseptic aisle where no one ever goes, who's going to look at it? So we looked at it completely differently. It's like, so how do you make that recommendation? How do you do that introduction? The whole thing was the barista is going to recommend it, and they're going to talk about it, and they're going to provide you if they like the product. So our whole strategy was to not do what anyone else actually did or told us to do. It was to like go into the center as far deep as we could get into the cultural center where people actually eat coffee shop. That's where they go to talk about life. And then find a way in there, and they'll try it there, and then it will grow from that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the only way to do that is to knock on doors. Like we didn't like send out salespeople. We found people in the coffee business, and they just walked the streets, knocked on doors, dropped off product, didn't sell. Try it. If you like it, I'll be back. We can talk about it. Or if you want to know any technical facts about it, we can talk about it. So it was very, very grassroots. And most companies don't want to invest the time. They don't want to build the staff. They don't want to work with people they just want to like get those numbers up and get it cranking and show some success. But it's like, I think that's the entrepreneurial way, is that you realize that success, nothing's going to come like overnight. You actually have to like work for it, and you have to go way further than you're expected to go.
When you started this US expansion, what was the hit rate, if you can give an estimate of
I have no idea. I think in the beginning it was just like, what is this? We launched in Intelligentsia. It was like one of the most prominent, coffee shops or small chains of coffee shops. And so it's also building up credibility. The way it works is like the barista coffee shop world is big but small. And so everyone kind of knows each other, and they know what everyone else is doing. So,
right. It's difficult to say, probably. Yeah, you probably don't have stats on that. People don't log their hits and misses.
No, but I mean, it was just hard work. It's just like, no, I don't want it. And then they hear about it someplace else, and then they come back. And then it's just like the hit rate. It's like, personally, I think the misses are so important. Like having the low hit rate. Again, the product was absolutely fantastic. So as soon as people started trying it, they realized that it didn't ruin their pour. In fact, it was almost better than milk in some cases, or different, but it actually tasted better. So I think like once it started going, and then you start to get acceptance from the top people in the industry, it goes really, really fast, because everything else you could compare it with it was, and we're talking like 2017 here, like
right. Yeah.
Everything's changed. Now there's like, I don't know, everyone who can try to produce an oat milk is trying to produce an oat milk, and everyone's talking plant-based. And if you look back, it was still like, you're some weird Swedish people with your oat milk, and it's like, that's cool. We were cool with that the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, you
stood behind it. Yeah.
Exactly. But since it, you've obviously had a great amount of momentum. You've grown tremendously in the last few years, and with that, of course, also there's been a need to get new investors aboard and grow and enter new markets. And we agreed before the episode to also touch upon the recent events that have been present in the media with the recent investment by Blackstone, and then alongside Natalie Portman and Oprah and the likes, and that created a bit of a stir among Oatly lovers and people in general. In both ways, there's been an active discussion. I've been following it on social media a bit and read statement from different medias and different plant-based influencers, and Oatly's statement as well, and it's been a very interesting discussion to follow in many ways. But
can I and sort of set the table for this a bit? Like it's the discussion has been there, but this sort of entrepreneurial perspective of the insides of the decision making process and whatever goes into a company with such a, I guess, a reformist human ideal entering into this big game of old values and old sort of traditions and habits and such. Like, of course, there's going to be some resistance. So there hasn't been much discussion into the sort of interplay of this dynamic.
No, because it's so hard for everyone to see. Like someone told me about, like, there was a Finnish brand, all these like brand experts, they know nothing about brands. I don't know why they could be brand experts, but they're like, they didn't even do their research. I don't know who they are. Like they didn't even do their research. They didn't know what they were getting into. And we spent 5 months in like philosophical discussions of analysis and thought going into it. I think obviously we knew there would be a backlash to this because it's not it's not like the obvious decision. I think the root of this has a lot to do with the fact that people don't trust companies. Like the trust for a company is very, very low. And along comes Oatly, and there's a feeling like we didn't build up like customers. We built up like we call it, like a cult, but we built up actually like friends. Like it's a movement. And so all of a sudden the movement makes a very weird decision to go to private equity. Now, everyone doesn't understand that most private equity they have the investments everywhere and all the evil things in the world, and unfortunately not all the good things. But why could you make that decision? Like, why would you do that? And our thought process was, and this is something that I think if people think through it a little bit, they'll understand, or maybe they won't understand, was we are falling behind on the global initiatives and the goals to save the planet. Like we have to cut things in half, the greenhouse gas emissions, by 2030. We're fucking that up. We're not even close. I mean, we're focused on COVID and we're focused on partying or having getting out in the sun or whatever it may be, going to the sauna, whatever you want to do. We're not focused on that. And so we look at it and say, we aren't going to make it. The second thing is we're not going to make it unless the huge mass amounts of capital stream in the world actually shift and start helping us. So if you look at those two things, there is nothing more important for Oatly to do than to find a way to shift those capital streams. So we're this amazing investment opportunity, and all we're doing is we're going to exploit that moment and use that to inspire capital. There's $4 trillion in private equity in the world. And a very, very, very small fraction of that goes to green investments.
Yeah.
So it goes to coal and it goes to pipelines and it goes to gas. And so if you want to actually move that, so what's better? Let's say you have 4 trillion. Everything that goes from that goes over to something green, ultimately has to be a win.
Yeah.
It's like it's quite simple. That is a win. If I were to say to you, if someone was to give $200 million to Greenpeace, Blackstone, $200 million to Greenpeace, would that be cool? And you'd be like, fuck, what, really?
Yeah, I can't trust Greenpeace anymore. Yeah, all right. Yeah.
I can't trust Greenpeace anymore. Now they're evil. No, but you would say that's great. Like it's going from there and it's going to Greenpeace. That's basically what's happened. The only problem is no one's going to give it to Greenpeace because it's a donation. They need to be able to turn a profit on that because private equity has to meet their 4 or 5%. They have to it's your pension fund and my pension fund. It's like that's what they're working on. So our thing is like, if you can show them that there's a different way, that there's a different direction, that will inspire others to do the same, and will start to move the capital and therefore come closer to actually meeting those cutting carbon emissions by 50%.
Yeah, in a very big way, this is a very sort of nice. It's also contemporary. It's a nice sort of example of how to, first of all, how to do this sort of transition, but then also to explain that we are in a transitional point in the world right now, and for things to transition, for $4 trillion to transition from one place to another, it takes time and it goes incrementally, and these incremental movements will happen in some sort of space of compromise. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I'm just saying, like, so how is it going to happen?
Right.
Like, how are you going to get it to move? It's not going to move by itself. If everyone's content, it's not going to move. So if you're going to do like massive transformative societal change, you've got to have friction. And you've got to realize that it's not going to be easy. Change is like the hardest thing of all. Think about it. Oatly's been sitting on the outside just hitting the system. We're punching it a little bit. We're writing on our packages. It says the reckless pursuit of profit should be criminal. Think about that. That's on our package in 2014. The reckless pursuit should be considered criminal. So we're punching on the outside all the time. And you punch and you punch and you punch, and it's like, oh, this is great. We've achieved this. But we don't feel like, we want to be able to look in the mirror and say, fuck, we're actually doing something. Like, we're not stepping up unless we try to change the system even more. And so now we're taking...
penetrating the monolith looks like this kind of.
Yeah, it's like we're taking a step, we're taking a step on the inside, and once you make the commitment that we're going to take the step on the inside and fight on the inside too, is there any place better to go than into the belly of the beast, like straight into the #1 private equity company in the world, Blackstone? And if we can achieve change there, I mean, no matter how small that change may be, it will grow and inspire and create other change. And we might never be able to measure it. We will never get credit for it. It doesn't matter. It's just, you've got to take these bolder steps in order to actually create that change. And I think some of the backlash to this is ironically the same people who want the same thing. It's like we want the same thing. We want to save the planet. It's just that it's like, oh no, you can't do that by taking that money. It's like, I understand this because I personally don't like companies. I don't like the capitalistic system. I hated the New York Yankees all my life because they were the baseball team with the biggest budget. And it's like, if you are that way and you're working in the system, I think you need the friction, So I understand the people who feel like that they don't understand the decision. I totally understand with them because I myself put companies into kind of good and bad.
I think also the problem is for some people, I think is also with the investment is that, obviously, as you said, Oatly is a great investment opportunity and there's rumors of IPOs going forward and you keep growing. It's going to be a good investment for Blackstone and everyone else. And I think some people are worried about, okay, you're going to turn more profit for Blackstone and then that money is not going to be invested in, similarly sustainable businesses and I think that might be part of the worry as well, and maybe also some people are worried that Oatly now has this powerhouse, behind them. That is this the first step in slipping from the values, and if it doesn't go that well, you can use a lot of money or maybe not that ethical tactics to start taking market share. That might be part of it.
But there is your issue. Right there is the issue with trust for companies. It's like we built up this massive trust with everyone, and it's so fragile. Not with everyone, because a lot of people say like, no way, I know those people, they're never going to compromise those values. But other people, it's like, it's just fragile, like, oh, now they've gone over. And instead of saying like, now they've gone in deeper, like their commitment is even greater. Like, it's a bet that we're doing, and it's this bet based on hope. Like, think about it. If we go back to the beginning of this interview, we were like these naive people. Like, when Tony and I started, like, we're going to change the world. We're going to sell oat milk. We're going to get people, like, it was the craziest idea ever. I mean, we have 45 employees, and we had a turnover of 200 million Swedish krona, $20 million. It was like, how are you ever going to do it? It's the same thing now. This is a bet based on hope. It's like, it's easy to say it's naive, but the thing is like, and again, I understand if people don't, because they don't have that view into the company, but it's like, money isn't driving this from the leadership of Oatly's standpoint. I can't speak for what drives Blackstone. I could surmise because, they're very good at the game of capitalism, but what's driving us is something completely different. And our feeling is that if we don't grow, the more we grow, the more we can spread about plant-based, the better chances we have to change a lot of the issues with the carbon emissions. So again, there's an understanding from our point about the feeling that could be out there, but at the same time, it's like we feel that this is the most important decision right now that we can ever make for the sake of the planet, and we're willing to take the backlash and then to work every single day to prove to people that everything that we're putting in place is even more deeply rooted in what we're doing. And it's like, again, none of us are in control of how things work. And it's like, it's not my system. I didn't create the system of capitalism or things. It's like, for me, it's just like, I've got to work within, like, what are the tools that I have where I can contribute? And one of the things is that people can sit back and point the finger, but like, what is the consumer doing? How are they educating themselves? How are they looking at things? Those are things that everyone needs to ask themselves. It's just that we did that, and then we took the decision, which we think is like the total right decision. And the only way that, we've got to prove that, obviously, it's a proof like anything else.
Yeah. I don't know how much you can go into this, but you said one thing, which I think is very true, is that people didn't witness the 5 months of deliberation that went into this decision. So do you want to sort of open the curtains a bit and talk about some of the arguments, pro and con, this decision that were spoken about, the most prominent ones?
No, but I mean, obviously people have painted companies into, their reputations, whatever the reputation of a company is. So I think that any time that we would go into a major private equity player, I mean, if you look there's everyone's going to point and say, oh, your owners are into this, therefore you're a bad company. That's just the way it is. So anytime that you look at in private equity, I mean, some of the facts behind this is that in order to build, so everyone who's listening probably knows that it hasn't been that easy to get a hold of Oatly products. Like, they're sold out all the time, all over the world. And that's a question of like supply and demand. So we're not able to meet the demand, and we may never be able to meet the demand. But in order to meet that demand, we have to build factories. And factories aren't something that you build in like 2 months, and they're not something that costs like $5 million. They're like very expensive. So if we don't build those, then we're not filling that demand unless people are eating plant-based. So in this round of funding, and again, I'm not the expert. This is, I work with the brand, but in this round of funding, there was a $200 million green loan. So it has sustainability goals and objectives in the loan. And in order for that loan to perform in the best way, we have to meet all these objectives. And then there was a round of private equity funding also, which included, part of it was Blackstone. There were some others. And then you got Oprah and Jay-Z and a number of others, now Howard Schultz and others. So, and the feeling was always has been is that you want, we obviously realize that we feel that we can change the system, that we can inspire people to change, that having a direct line to people at Blackstone and to discussing with them everything that we're about is something that when you're on the outside, you're just hitting. But we're on the outside hitting and we're on the inside hitting. And so it's kind of doubled up our game. And that allows us to even, like double down on our investments. We make the bigger investments. And we realize like anytime a company goes from a little nerdy Swedish company in the middle of a field to a bigger global company, there's a risk that it can lose its mojo because we like the small player. And so again, the only way we can prove that is by being like this fucking little Swedish company in the field hitting on the outside the whole time, no matter how big we get.
Yeah.
So those are the decisions that, when you make those decisions, you look at it. And for us to take already green money because it would be convenient, it would look good on paper, but change absolutely nothing. We felt that would be the worst thing that we could do. It's the easiest thing for the brand. It would be the smoothest thing for everyone. I wouldn't have to spend my days writing statements or trying to answer things or trying to explain this. It would just be like, but that wouldn't be the right thing for the planet. It's better to shift, to take something that would go someplace else and to move it over to a green investment and let every other venture capital company look at that and say, you mean I can make money on that? Like, that's a good investment. Right. Okay, I'm going to do that investment. And it inspires, the whole, again, I can imagine private equity looks a lot at what everyone else is making money on and then shifts their money over there. And if this can start that shift, fine. The next question, though, is where are the companies to invest in? Yeah, this is the bigger play. Like, so where are the companies to invest in? I think there are a lot of private equity companies that are invested in coal and they're invested in oil and they're invested in those things that you would think aren't the coolest from a sustainability perspective. And they're like, okay, we want to clean this thing up. Like, we want to go more green. How are we going to do it? And they're like, okay, I got some little startups going on here, but again, they got the pension fund of the, South Dakota Teachers Union, and they've got to turn that 4 or 5% or they're not going to get their pension. So they're like, that's a risk. So I need something bigger. I need something in movement. I need an investment that I can actually, feel good about. Because I think we're people, everyone's people. I think that everyone's people except for maybe Donald Trump. That's another question. But everyone's people. And I think they want to do the best thing. But it's like, where are those? And this is the key part to it, is that you can look at it now and say there aren't that many green companies, and then you can say like, yeah, but they're coming because it's going to get critical. And when it gets critical, our only hope is that entrepreneurs step up and start doing crazy, wonderful things that get us out of this shitty position that we're in. And if the money's already there because this little oat milk company triggered something, then it's like, I'm going to go back and look at this and say, like, this was the biggest, most important thing we did, maybe even more so than making oat milk,
Yeah, because, investors aren't stupid, and everyone is understanding that the shift is going towards, sustainable businesses being good investments and not being mutually exclusive anymore. You don't have to be a non-profit or an NGO or something like that anymore to do good things. Rather, the best business opportunities will probably come from solving the biggest issues in the world, as you said. So,
I think that you have, again, the world that we've all built up is not something that we necessarily can be super proud of, especially in the last 100 years or something. There's been a lot of greed in the system. There's been a lot of just churning profits, and I think that there are a lot of investors in those positions that really don't feel good necessarily about representing those investments, and they want to shift. They want to find something better. That's the start of it. You have to believe that humanity is basically good. And so you have to say that's the start of it. So how can we speed that process up? It's like I understand that if you're a consumer out there and you just look at the headline, it's a very Trumpian headline, like Oatly's owner invested in this and they're friends with this. It's like, it's like an oversimplification and then a quick, easy cancel culture statement, and then I feel good about myself. But it's actually working against everything they stand for. It's actually like extremely detrimental to their own set of values. And I think that that's something that people just have to have time to work through. It's kind of a natural thing. And then again, you've got to work. I mean, if you're going to create systemic change, there's like layers all over the place and all these levers you have to pull. And maybe Oatly has a couple levels and a few levers. And we're trying to pull like everything we can to do our part, to step up and do our part. But we need like other people to do things. So we realize like we inspire consumers. They eat more plant-based. They eat more plant-based. You get a lot more oat milk makers. Now we got like 20 oat milk makers. Great. They're making oat milk instead of processing cow's milk into milk. That's a lever. We pulled it, jumped up it's like, it's a process and all these different things have to play. And we realize that if we inspire some of these things, and these things can be against us, they can be companies who compete with us. It doesn't matter that they're gaining ground too is great. It's like if all the plant-based makers jump up to the next level, great. Of course, we want to lead that. We want to be that like generational company that people look back and say, once in a generation, there was a company that actually led something. That's the role that we like kind of aim to play. And to do that, you need some size. You need to build your oat milk factories. You need to build oat milk factories that are, in fact, so efficient that you can lower the price. Because again, if it's $6.99 a carton for, like 2-liter carton in the US, who's going to buy that? It's not like the people in inner city Atlanta who are lactose intolerant who really need oat milk. It's like, those are the things that we think about, produce efficiently, get the price down, make it more available to a lot more people. There's so many levels of complexity, I think, in that. So it's not black and white. People want to live in this black and white world, and it's like full of color and nuanced, and it needs to be explored.
I want to tie this to what you said in the beginning about the sort of human voice of Oatly and finding, like, actually having research behind and complex decision making, complex logic behind the I guess simply packaged human statement and human voice of the company. When you're faced with a situation like this, which is equally complicated in the other direction, how do you go about communicating this, or sort of sustaining your voice throughout this crisis, or crisis? But this thing.
I think it's trying to be as human as possible, and that's not always possible because we made a very pragmatic decision in a very emotional world, and we're emotional too, and we know people make emotional decisions. So it's very easy when you feel like the people who loved you the most all of a sudden just don't show that love anymore. It's like an emotional thing. So I think our way about this is just been to be as honest and open and transparent as we possibly can, and to not fall into this defensive situation where we're trying to feel like we're explaining things all the time, because a lot of the things that we've just talked about now, and we're just still scratching the surface because of the complexities. It's not an easy thing to explain. The simple reason is that we made a decision to do the best thing for the planet, and even if that decision was controversial and it was difficult. So, and I think the whole thing is we're a company of people trying to help other people out, and that's what we're going to be tomorrow. And as we go forward, it'll just be more and more obvious of all the projects that we're doing. It's we're working with farmers in Iowa and Minnesota to reintroduce oats, because the topsoil in the US is dead in 30 years. You won't be able to grow anything on it. So we're reintroducing oats as a way of helping the topsoil, and it's no one sees these things that we're doing. It's why would you do that? It's because we actually care about the food system that we have that's broken. And so I think the way forward is not to try to explain everything we do, because again, you've got to earn that trust, and if we've lost it, we'll earn it again. It's just to instead actually show that even if a company gets more funding and has more money and builds more factories, they can still be the cool oat punk, fighting against the system from the outside and the inside regardless. And we haven't had that many companies that have done that, obviously, because the management may change. But it's the same management who's running the company, and we make the decisions. And just because capital comes in from the outside doesn't mean that capital makes the decisions. It's the management who makes the decisions. And we're going to make the same decisions that we made regardless.
Yeah. It's kind of the same thing when Metallica became mainstream and wasn't just a Bay Area underground thrash metal band, sort of, punching the inside from the outside and punching the mainstream of the music scene from the outside anymore. And then some people just get a distaste for that.
Of course.
Streaming.
I totally understand that. That's the problem, is that if we really want to change, inspire change in the world, we need to be more mainstream. And the concept of mainstream is uncool.
Yeah.
So it's okay, you're mainstream, now you're not interesting anymore. Okay, so how do you be mainstream and still remain interesting?
Yeah, exactly.
Good question.
Maybe
you guys got the answer, because if you know that,
we'll call you.
Yeah,
we'll call you.
I'll call you, John, because that's a great question. Yeah, and maybe it's not even a question with a simple answer. Maybe it's just an ongoing process.
Yeah,
it is. I think everything's an ongoing process, and I think that's one of my whole theories on things is, every single time that you get into this, adversity or conflict or failure, if you go back in our history and look at the evil Swedish milk lobby suing us, that it's most people look at that and they can get oh, wow, this is so crazy, it's so terrible, now we're done, the evil Swedish milk lobby sued us. But we looked at it just as a brief. It's the greatest brief to do something amazing. And that's how we looked at the last week. Again, this is the most inspiring brief I've ever received in order to dig down even deeper and to prove everyone who has any doubts that they're actually wrong. And so I need that brief. The creative department needs that brief. Everyone at Oatly needs that brief in order to begin that proof process. And so it sounds a little bit weird, but it's also there is something there's so much energy in how you deal with failure or adversity or conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for the last part of this podcast, I'd like to maybe get a bit more hands-on still, since I think personally at least you're one of the most interesting creative people on earth. And if you look at what you've done with Oatly, it's still it's very. Maybe in some way it's not, you haven't made the most obvious marketing choices, and you've enlightened us on why you made the choices and finding the human voice and finding the values. But maybe looking at entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs who are stuck with their own companies or are looking to start something, how would you advise them to go about building brands or finding your voice or starting these kinds of exercises?
So I start with when we started this, we started with we just figured people don't need brands. If you think about it, brands think that they're really needed, and they're not. People need something more real. And so when you if you treat them more real and you give them something more real, people will be attracted to it. The whole idea of a brand, if you look back in the beginning of the 1900 logo and you remember it, so you go into the store and I have some trust for this. I think we're kind of through that period. So I think when people are building things, they should have that in mind, that they have to do something for real and they have to treat people like real humans. And when you start in that area, then you approach things differently. There isn't a sales process, because I look at it if I do an ad, we do an ad and we put it in the Atlantic magazine, or we put it in, very well written, very smart magazine in the US, and people write into me and complain about it. That gives me energy. Why are you complaining? And they're complaining because that ad annoyed them, or or something like that, and it's like, wow, you took the time to actually write to me about that. Like, took your time in your life and write. I know they're going to go try the product. So again, it's more like fitting in or conflicting or being part of culture, and like finding your way in a world and not in a brand world, not in a market. Marketing is not interesting. So it's like stepping outside those things, and then instead, finding how you fit in. And then there's the whole thing of contributing. I really think that there doesn't need to be a conflict with contributing to society and making money. If like we can take capitalism and you can regulate it to the point where, when I say regulated, when it's totally unregulated, that's where you have issues of just, capitalism gone bad. But if you actually take that and then you move it, and people approach it as, so what's my contribution? Then they're going to feel good about what they're doing, and they're going to get that respect back. I think we're moving into a world that's going to be very, very different from the one that we had, where people are going to pay a lot more attention on actually, so what are you doing and how does that affect me in my life and society and those around me?
Yeah, exactly. Because it seems that, most companies nowadays will have basically the same resources that they can use if you're building, at least if you're building something a bit smaller in scale and doing web shops or whatever. You have the same, you can use the same Amazon web structures, and you can use online designers or whatever. So it's you can't really differentiate yourself with these kind of things anymore. You need to actually find something that people are interested in, and not just interested in buying, but interested in talking about. It seems like there's a big shift going on at the moment.
Yeah, and I can give you guys an example. Like, everyone runs a lot of data in their companies. They do like all these market research things. We don't do anything. Like, I look at I don't even have a target group. People say, what's your target group? Why does it matter if I want to talk to a 16-year-old girl or a 45-year-old doctor? It doesn't matter. It's like, who's interested in what they put in their body, and who's interested in having a planet to live on in the future? 80% of the population, or whatever, 90% of the population. Yeah. So it's like, I don't look at data because all the data is coming from the same angle. And so your interpretation of the data most likely will be the same. And if you miss your interpretation point of the data, then your idea is going to be like seriously off. Now, if you instead look at people, like listen to people, talk to people, ride the bus, whatever it may be, then you're going to have a much better understanding of culture. And if we spend a lot more of time doing that than we do of just like looking at numbers for the answers, because numbers tend to be like some sort of like, safety cushion for everyone. Like, oh, but the numbers were there. It's like, why, like safety, because that's like the worst thing possible. It's better to take the risks and to actually look and do what you believe in.
Yeah. So there's something about having your finger on the pulse of the zeitgeist by just being out there that's super valuable.
I think so. I mean, again,
even just as a human, that's valuable, I think.
No, exactly. But I mean, a lot of the things that I do is before we went to the US, I asked a lot of people, so where does culture start in the US? And no one could answer that question. It was like, no one ever thought about it. It's like, I don't know, a sneaker shop in Brooklyn. Okay, a sneaker shop in Brooklyn. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, where does change happen? Like, where, because that's what kind of where you want to be. And in one sense, it's the coffee shop. I mean, that's where life is talked about, like my problems, my successes, whatever. I meet my friends. Or you talk about the fact that you have a president that's doing everything that he can to destroy the planet, and it's like, oh, that's not very good. So it can be, I think that if you remove yourself a lot of times from the business aspects of business and you put yourself in the human aspects of the world, and then let's let business be a vehicle in order to achieve some of your goals, it becomes quite interesting. It becomes very interesting, in fact. And I think most people are just stuck in the fact that they got an idea and they call themselves an entrepreneur, and they need to be able to get some sort of valuation so they can, get some kind of return on their original investment. Like, all these terms are just like, if you think about it, it's like, wow, okay, how interesting is that? People should just be doing the coolest thing that they can and trying to contribute and doing stuff. And if it ends up in, you know, some sort of like monetary reward, that's great, you know, bitchin' cool.
Yeah, what a shame to be having to end this discussion. I could personally stay on for another couple of hours.
This has been great. This has been really, really great. Thank you so much.
But, like I said, the whole thing is like try to be as transparent as possible on things like this. And even like you go through rough periods of time, and it's like, obviously, like I can't talk about all kinds of things on a money deal because of the rules and laws that govern that. So, and again, I'm not in all the money discussions at all. So it's just like, it's good though to try to give people some sort of insight into how a company thinks when they go about making decisions that can be controversial or difficult. And again, I am a person who personally has prejudged everyone very quickly on every decision that was made, you know? And so I understand that people do that, but I think when you're living in things and you see the complexities and that everything is nuanced and it's not black and white, it's gray and full of color, and that if people just like, you know, look at that and apply that to their own life and the decisions they make, they can realize that okay, wow, I need to understand this a little bit more, and then I need to step up myself. So
yeah. And I think it's good also to realize like this is the language of the hands-on information regarding this clash of values, or this new sort of reformatory force in this field, like capitalism and companies emerging.
It's coming, more is coming. This is wonderful. Like I get so blown away that an oat milk company, I'm thinking back to 2012, can generate so much opinions and so much energy. It's fucking amazing. And I think we're on the beginning of that. As we go forward, there'll be a lot of discussions about those things. And people who are involved in business and just worried about their bottom line, that was easy. Boy, those old days were really easy. Now they got to actually think about what are they doing and how are they affecting others, and what kind of environment are they building for human beings, you know, social sustainability and planetary sustainability issues. Like, it's very complex for a CEO. I'm glad I'm not the CEO. I'm glad Tony's the CEO.
Exactly. Yeah. We look forward to following the story and see where it takes you and your CEOs and everyone. So thanks for sitting down with us and chatting.
Thank you so much, John.
Yeah, guys, take care, man.
And thanks to everyone watching on YouTube as well. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you feel like it, and also give some form of thumbs either way. Just react and
no, only thumbs up. Thumbs up. We don't want any negativity now.
Do whatever you feel like.
Only thumbs up. You'll be blocked if you put it up. Thumbs down.
Yeah, thumbs down are cool too. Thumbs down are cool. I understand.
Exactly.
No worries.
Yeah, listen to them. But stay tuned. More coming up this fall. Bye.